At first glance, this story looks like a picture-perfect rise to fame. Everything seemed polished, controlled, and effortless. But that surface-level glow hid a far more complex reality. This wasn't a typical celebrity fairy tale, it was a journey shaped by pressure, discipline, and battles no spotlight could reveal. To the world, Ciara was simply the fearless performer, sharp choreography, commanding presence, and a smile that suggested absolute certainty. But the real story unfolded far away from the stage, and that's where it becomes compelling. Ciara built her identity on quiet resilience. She carried herself with intention, as someone grounded and self-assured, even when life tried to scatter her focus. That composure wasn't accidental. It was forged early on. Growing up in a military household, with parents serving in both the Army and the Air Force, stability was never guaranteed. Home was a constantly changing concept. New places, new faces, new beginnings, over and over again. That kind of upbringing teaches you how to adjust quickly, how to rely on yourself, and how to stay mentally strong when nothing feels permanent. As an only child, she learned independence early. Solitude didn't intimidate her, it sharpened her. Reflection became second nature, and self-belief became survival. As she grew older, music quietly stepped in as her refuge. While others were still searching for direction, Ciara was already envisioning her future. She believed deeply in the power of intention, of speaking dreams aloud and treating them as promises rather than wishes. That mindset guided her when her family eventually settled near Atlanta, a city alive with rhythm, creativity, and possibility. Being surrounded by music felt like alignment rather than coincidence. She didn't just have talent, she had focus. She balanced school cheerleading, modeling, and performance, learning how to hold attention without demanding it. Even then, people sensed something distinct about her presence. When her music career finally launched, it didn't crawl forward, it surged. There was no slow build. Her debut album exploded onto the scene. Tracks like Goodies and One, Two-Step dominated the airwaves, and almost overnight, her name became impossible to ignore. At an age when many artists are still waiting for their first break, she had already reached milestones others never touch. The industry embraced her image instantly. She was crowned the face of a new sound, an era-defining label she later admitted she never wanted, but couldn't escape. To the public, her life looked flawless. Yet here's the truth most people missed: success didn't shield her from scrutiny. It amplified it. With fame came relentless expectations, criticism, and pressure to maintain an image that left little room to breathe. While the world celebrated her rise, behind closed doors, she was navigating the heavy weight of an industry that never stops demanding more. Nothing she did went unnoticed. Every step was analyzed, every choice dissected. Yet one trait consistently defined her: endurance. She didn't make noise when things got difficult. She didn't perform frustration for sympathy. Instead, she kept going. When later projects failed to meet the industry's expectations, she didn't walk away. She paused, recalibrated, and trusted that timing mattered just as much as talent. What truly complicated her journey was that the pressure didn't stay confined to her career. Her personal life slowly became public property, and that shift changed everything. The same audience that once applauded her confidence now felt entitled to critique her decisions. Private friendships turned into breaking news. Minor interactions were magnified into full-blown controversies. Rather than reacting emotionally, Ciara leaned into another defining strength: emotional restraint. She resisted the urge to explain herself to everyone with an opinion. Silence became her shield. And just when people assumed they understood her completely, new narratives kept surfacing. Old chapters were reopened. Past connections resurfaced under fresh scrutiny. Bit by bit, the pressure escalated into something heavier than before. And here's the truth most people didn't see coming: her real test hadn't even started yet. Because just as she believed she had regained balance, her private life moved directly into the spotlight. This was the phase that stretched her composure to its limits. She had always been known as respectful, reserved, and intentional. But the industry she worked in rarely allowed space for privacy. Every relationship, every interaction, every personal decision was transformed into a headline. Her name began circulating in conversations that had nothing to do with music. One moment, in particular, grabbed public attention: visible tension with another high-profile female artist. What started as an awkward interaction at a party quickly spiraled into a viral spectacle. Clips spread online, words were interpreted and reinterpreted, and fans rushed to choose sides. What surprised many people was how she handled it. She didn't retaliate. She didn't trade insults. Instead, one of her strongest traits surfaced again: self-control. She chose her words carefully, and when the situation cooled, she embraced peace rather than prolonging the conflict. That quiet maturity stood out in an industry built on reaction. But the calm didn't last. Just when it seemed the drama had settled, another controversy reignited public debate. Years later, her decision to collaborate with an artist whose past actions remained deeply painful for many sparked intense backlash. The response was immediate and emotional. People questioned her morals, her judgment, even her integrity. Some fans felt let down. Others felt conflicted. Ciara stood by her choice, explaining that the collaboration was rooted in music, not history. Still, the criticism lingered. And here's the twist: despite the outrage, the song succeeded. The charts responded. Her visibility surged. After years away from the top, her name was back where it once dominated. What made this moment so complex was the contradiction. Professional success arrived hand in hand with personal criticism. She was celebrated and condemned at the same time. That tension followed her everywhere. Yet she remained steady. Her confidence never crossed into arrogance. She trusted her own decisions, even when others refused to. Meanwhile, the past refused to stay buried. Old feuds, former friendships, and previous relationships were dragged back into the conversation. Every move she made was weighed against someone else's feelings. Unexpectedly, fans began focusing more on her former relationship choices than her current achievements. And just like that, her story took another unpredictable turn, proof that for her, success was never just about music. For the longest time, she chose silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because she valued peace more than applause. That restraint became even more powerful when the chapter that changed everything finally came to light. Her relationship with a well-known rapper once seemed untouchable. To the public, they were the definition of a power couple, admired, celebrated, and endlessly praised. They shared success, affection, and eventually a child, building what looked like a solid future together. But away from cameras and curated moments, the foundation was quietly cracking. Whispers of betrayal began to circulate. Trust eroded slowly, then all at once. And when the relationship finally collapsed, it didn't do so quietly. It unraveled in front of the world. Legal battles, co-parenting disputes, and painful accusations dominated headlines. In that moment, Ciara was no longer framed simply as an entertainer. She was a woman fighting to protect her dignity and her role as a mother. That period pushed her to the edge. Her strength was scrutinized, questioned, and tested in ways fame had never demanded before. And just when it seemed she had reached her lowest point, life shifted, suddenly and unexpectedly. Out of chaos, a new chapter emerged. Instead of retreating, she rebuilt. Quietly. Intentionally. She poured her energy into her son, her work, and her own healing. The narrative many expected, her fading into the background, never happened. Instead, she rose with more clarity than ever. Step by step, she redefined her life, and along that journey, fate introduced her to someone who matched her growth rather than competing with it. That turning point arrived when Russell Wilson entered her life. What outsiders called a fairy tale was, for Ciara, a deliberate decision. She knew herself better now. She understood what she needed in a partner: respect, stability, shared values, and emotional safety. Russell didn't just become her husband, he embraced her son as his own, helping create a blended family grounded in intention and love. What set this chapter apart was that she didn't just find romance, she built a life. One that felt stable even while public noise continued. Because despite her happiness, the past occasionally resurfaced. Her former partner still appeared in headlines, and curiosity around co-parenting never truly faded. Yet she handled it with patience and composure, consistently choosing what was best for her child over public opinion. This stage of her journey highlighted a different kind of power, emotional intelligence. She knew when to respond and when silence carried more weight. Slowly, people stopped seeing her as just a headline and began recognizing her as a woman who had mastered balance between ambition and motherhood, privacy and visibility. And that balance sparked something remarkable. As her personal life steadied, her career surged again. New music reminded audiences why they fell in love with her in the first place. Viral tracks, dance challenges, and high-profile collaborations returned her to center stage, but this time, her presence felt unshakable. She wasn't chasing relevance. She embodied it. She didn't merely survive the storms. She used them. Criticism became fuel. Doubt became momentum. Alongside music, she expanded into business and acting, revealing yet another layer of her identity. Fashion, skincare, film, each venture reflected creativity, discipline, and vision. Her life was no longer defined by heartbreak or controversy, but by growth and intention. Fans noticed. Respect replaced speculation. By the time this chapter fully unfolded, her journey looked almost unreal in hindsight. What began as early fame tangled with public heartbreak had transformed into a story of empowerment, resilience, and legacy. Every setback connected seamlessly to the strength she now carried. Every tear, every risk, every moment of uncertainty had shaped the woman she became. This wasn't the point where life became easy, it was the point where she became stronger. She redefined success on her own terms, proving that evolution doesn't require erasing the past. Millions followed her story and found hope in it, especially those who had been told one mistake could define them forever. Ciara showed that setbacks aren't endings, they're pauses that prepare you for something greater. Her pain became wisdom. Her silence became strategy. Her endurance became influence. And her marriage to Russell Wilson symbolized far more than love. It represented healing, alignment, and a partnership rooted in respect and shared purpose. Together, they built a family anchored in faith, communication, and growth, something deeply intentional, not performative. Ciara didn't just find love. She found peace. And that peace echoed through her music, her smile, and the quiet confidence with which she now moves through the world, proof that storms don't break you when you learn how to stand taller after them. Fate shifted her path once more, but this time, what looked like a possible ending became the start of something richer and more meaningful. Happiness entered her life with stability and direction, not by accident, but by design. Motherhood didn't slow her down or redefine her limits, it expanded her sense of purpose. Her son, her blended family, and her tight-knit circle reflected a life rebuilt with care and intention. Nothing felt hurried. Nothing felt accidental. Each choice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. She created a space where love felt secure, growth felt natural, and being yourself wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. What made this stage especially powerful was her refusal to grow complacent. Even while standing at the height of her success, Ciara never treated achievement as a finish line. She kept evolving, experimenting with sound, visuals, and expression, proving that reinvention isn't just for newcomers but for artists who truly understand themselves. Her creativity became sharper, more personal, and deeply reflective of the woman she had become. Every project felt intentional, shaped by experience rather than pressure. At the same time, she stepped fully into her role as a businesswoman. Whether in fashion, beauty, or strategic partnerships, her decisions were rooted in alignment, not trends. She understood ownership, longevity, and the importance of building something that would last. Her influence extended beyond music, it became generational. Every venture was another step toward a future she wasn't just enjoying, but safeguarding for her children. Her voice also grew stronger in a different way. She began speaking openly about self-worth, faith, and growth, not as empty inspiration, but as someone who had lived through betrayal, doubt, and rebuilding. Her words resonated because they carried truth. She reminded people that patience isn't weakness, that peace is power, and that understanding your value can completely redirect your life. This era of confidence looked different on her. It wasn't loud or performative, it was steady and grounded. She no longer needed validation from charts or comparisons. She moved with certainty, unaffected by trends or public opinion. That inner stability gave her grace under pressure and made her an example of what happens when a woman believes in herself without asking for permission. Her legacy began forming beyond trophies or accolades. It lived in the women she inspired, the conversations she reframed, and the hope she gave to those starting over. She showed that public heartbreak doesn't have to end in bitterness, that rebuilding can be intentional, and that choosing better doesn't require guilt. Her journey became proof that realignment is always possible. Even in moments of celebration, she stayed grounded. Gratitude became part of her identity. She acknowledged her beginnings, the lessons learned, and the people who stood by her when the future was uncertain. That humility added depth to her success. It showed that achievement doesn't have to harden you, it can soften you in the best way. Over time, it became clear she wasn't chasing relevance, she was building longevity. She invested in herself as a woman just as much as she invested in her career. Mental, emotional, and spiritual balance became priorities, allowing her to show up fully for her family, her work, and herself. Looking back, this chapter felt like a quiet reward. The peace that followed perseverance. The joy that replaced pain. Her life became proof that sometimes you don't lose when things fall apart, you win because they do. She didn't just endure her journey, she transformed through it. And that's what made this phase unforgettable. It wasn't fueled by drama, but by intention. It showed a woman stepping fully into her power, owning her story without resentment, and moving forward without fear. She became a living example of resilience, proof that when you honor your worth, trust the process, and keep growing even after success, life can exceed every expectation you once had. She continued releasing hits, dominating viral moments, and quietly building businesses that reinforced she was never just chasing applause. From the outside, it looked effortless, but that ease was the result of years of inner work. Instead of breaking under pressure, she refined herself. Instead of reacting, she rose. She learned that silence can be strength, that peace can be strategy, and that not every battle deserves your energy. And through that wisdom, she didn't just protect her success, she redefined it. This is the point where her story quietly overturns the shallow way success is usually measured. Awards, chart rankings, and fame all passed through her life, but none of them were the foundation of her journey. Her greatest accomplishment was resilience, the rare ability to evolve without losing herself in the process. Reinvention, in her case, was never about becoming someone else. It was about letting go of versions of herself that no longer fit. With time, she didn't shrink or dilute who she was, she stepped into it more fully. Each transformation was guided by purpose, not pressure, and that alignment is what gave her longevity in an industry obsessed with what's new. She also proved that setbacks don't always arrive labeled as failure. Sometimes they come disguised as endings that feel unfair, humiliating, or deeply painful. She faced many of those moments in public, which made them heavier to carry. Still, Ciara refused to let public opinion define her private worth. While others rushed to tell her story for her, she was quietly rewriting it herself. She didn't rush healing, and she didn't perform strength to earn approval. She allowed the process to take its time, even when patience was mistaken for weakness. Eventually, that patience reshaped everything. Not just her career, but her presence. There was a visible shift, from trying to prove herself to choosing to protect her peace. From reacting to deciding. She stopped moving defensively and started moving with certainty. That certainty showed up in her work, her words, and the way she navigated her personal life. It was strength without bitterness, confidence without ego. She demonstrated that growth doesn't need noise to be powerful. Her influence extended far beyond music because people recognized themselves in her journey. Anyone who had been judged for a chapter they were still healing from found comfort in her evolution. Anyone who had been underestimated or publicly doubted saw hope in her consistency. She didn't present herself as flawless, she showed what perseverance looks like in real time. She never denied the pain, she modeled how to move through it with dignity. That honesty made her relatable in a way fame rarely allows. What stood out most was her refusal to let heartbreak harden her. Where others build walls, she built boundaries. She learned how to protect her heart without closing it entirely. That distinction changed everything. It allowed her to love again without fear, trust again without naivety, and create a life that felt deeply fulfilling rather than just impressive. Her happiness became a quiet rejection of the idea that success must come at the cost of self. The same intention carried into her business ventures. She didn't attach her name to anything that didn't align with her values. Each move felt like an extension of who she was, not a quick grab for relevance. She understood that branding wasn't just marketing, it was alignment. That awareness set her apart. She wasn't just building wealth, she was building ownership, stability, and something that could last beyond her. The mogul energy people recognized wasn't accidental, it was the result of foresight and discipline. Her journey also highlighted the power of timing. She never forced comebacks or chased visibility. She trusted that what was meant for her would arrive when she was ready to receive it. In a culture obsessed with speed, her patience was radical. She showed that stepping back doesn't mean falling behind, and that sometimes the strongest move is to pause, realign, and return with clarity. Through motherhood, partnership, and personal growth, she